The movie that we are reviewing on Greatest Trek today has some pretty heavy themes, suicide and some abortion-related content in this film, and we talk about it on the show. So if you're feeling too heavy of feelings about those kinds of things and don't want to listen to a podcast about it, turn back now.
My friends, the great experiment. We should analyze the optical properties of this movie.
We've got 50,000 movies in the database. There must be something worth watching.
This is a movie house. This place isn't about function. It's about fantasy.
You could always read a book.
Welcome to Greatest Trek. It's a new Star Trek podcast from the makers of The Greatest Generation. I'm Adam Pranica.
I'm Ben Harrison.
And we're still in the Greatest Trek Film Festival. I got the bends going from last week's film to this film. You want to get a little sad and wistful with this week's movie?
Yeah.
Wow. I had a lot of feelings watching this one. Amazing.
It's I would say a more emotionally authentic movie than Supernova in a lot of ways.
You only barely see fewer butts.
That's true. Again, a stacked cast. This movie has such a stacked cast that John Cho has like a deep background part.
Yeah, that's fun.
Like John Cho got cast for like a little role, and there are no little roles. There are only little actors, but he wasn't that big yet.
I'm just cruising through the Steven Soderbergh filmography. What an absolute dynamite career. Michael Clayton.
Banger.
Syriana.
Banger. Out of Sight. Banger.
The Limey. The Informant.
Pretty much any time he's worked with Clooney, he's knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, absolutely. And Clooney hot maybe just over half the time in his movies. Sometimes you get a chubby Clooney, and that's fun too.
Yeah, I don't mind a chubby Cloon, you know?
Yeah. Just really fun filmography, really fun filmmaker today. A kind of, I don't say this with any amount of disparagement, but I think when people say that they're fans of Steven Soderbergh, I'm not sure Solaris is part of that conversation. You know?
I think, yeah, it maybe gets categorized as minor Soderbergh.
Yeah, and I don't mean that at all. Only in the sense that, like, Aaron Brockovich is major Soderbergh.
Have you ever tried Soderbergh's signature liquor offering?
I didn't know it existed. What is it? Is it a Magic Mike tie-in?
It is not. It is...
Is it a Che tie-in?
It is called Singani 63. It's a 500-year-old Bolivian spirit distilled from muscat of Alexandria grapes high in the Andes.
I love the idea of getting faded to Bolivian liquor.
Yeah. So I guess it sounds like it's maybe kind of like a South American grappa, essentially.
Sounds like that'll fuck you up.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's the official alcohol of Steven Soderbergh.
Did you see this movie in the theater? 2002 Solaris, the reimagining of the Tarkovsky film. I never saw the original Tarkovsky either.
I think I may have seen the original Tarkovsky film, but like before this came out. So like in such a distant past that I very vaguely remember it. Yeah. And I feel like those Tarkovsky sci-fis and those Stanislaw Lem books always get recommended to me and kind of remain a big blind spot of my cultural perusements.
I know we're going to talk a lot about this throughout the recap of the movie, but I do just want to describe the very different types of science fiction film there are. Like, this is a mood. This is a mood, and this is a science fiction film having to do with what might be beyond the dimension of life and death.
Right.
Instead of like futurism and technology and stuff. This is a very different kind of sci-fi and a version of sci-fi I wish there was more of.
It is so uninterested in like how it works of anything.
Yeah.
Like there's a little bit of that. You can tell that they thought about it when they were scripting it and stuff, but not in a way that got in the way of feelings and personal relationships and vibes, you know?
I mean, you could say that relationships are timeless, Ben.
Yeah.
There is no future without them.
Yeah. Very much like watching Supernova. I just looked at these sets and I was like, I wish they made movies that look like this still. Like, there's a very specific era of sci-fi set, which is the, like, all DVD players and personal electronics were silver, and so all sci-fi sets were silver for a little while.
Interesting that we got another purple sci-fi movie back to back, though.
Yeah.
After my film paper of the last episode stated something like, purple is a bad science fiction color as its thesis. Here we are again.
Here we are. Do you want to get into this 2002 motion picture, Adam?
Can't wait, Ben. Let's really go deep on a deep, deep sci-fi film. It is Solaris. It's a film that isn't particularly interested in telling you everything about itself or its characters immediately. This is going to be a slow burn.
Yeah.
And so much of that burn in the beginning was my question about, like, what is the George Clooney character? What does he do?
What would you say you do here?
Is he a therapist? He's definitely not a chef with the way he's hammering at that glass cutting board.
Oh man, he has sub Benjamin Sisko level vegetable chopping skills.
Yeah. Ow! Go easy. Hey, I won't say go easy. If you have a glass cutting board, just fucking get rid of it.
Yeah, those are no good.
Yeah.
I guess you can use them as like presentation cutting board. Like if you're putting out a cheese platter or something, like I don't think glass is terrible for that.
Don't unnecessarily throw a thing away.
Yeah.
I get it. Just don't chop on it.
Why would you say something like that, Adam?
I know, I fucked up.
But yeah, like I got the distinct sense that he's like some kind of psychologist and that he is kind of working himself to the bone. Like there's not much to go on, but we learned that he takes 7 a.m. appointments and 6:15 appointments, and that really leapt off the page to me.
That was really telling. When is your therapist available to you, Ben? I imagine they're telling you once a month at a very confined time, kind of hoping that you're unavailable.
My therapist's availability has gone to never because she stopped taking the insurance that I have. I'm actually in the market at the moment. So I feel like she was like, what insurance does Ben take again? Should probably drop that one. That one's a bit of a hassle to deal with.
I got the sense that were there to be a specialty that the George Clooney character was in, it has something that's grief or grief adjacent, and it made me wonder just to what extent the 9/11-ness was a part of the engine for some of the feelings that we feel during this episode. The idea of loss and regret around those losses specifically. Yeah,
I mean, especially because like people hadn't really experienced anything like loss until 9/11.
Right. It had never happened before. It's in many ways the moment that changed everything.
Yeah. I mean, that's why people say never forget, because it's like that was an inflection point.
Now look at us. We're feeling lost all the time.
Now grief is like a part of day-to-day life. And before, not.
Could do with a little less of that.
Hey, thanks, Bin Laden.
So while you're trying to construct a professional life for George Clooney, you may have arrived at a place that is like, yeah, just a guy who's doing therapy, sometimes in groups, sometimes one-on-one. Certainly not the type of therapist that would get a phone call from an astronaut. Like two mysterious dudes show up at George Clooney's doorstep and they're like, hey, you gotta watch this thing. So they sit him down, and this is the John Cho part.
Yeah.
John Cho's in soft focus in the background, and you can definitely hear that it's him, and he's like, hey, check this out. And he gets this message from astronaut.
Is he a goon? Like, is John Cho reading as tough guy to you in this? Because he kind of read as like I'm a little scared of these two guys.
DBA does not have a definition in this film, DBA being the logo on the video we're seeing and in its association to both the astronauts and the station that we come to see later.
Right. A very funny name for a mysterious business to be the abbreviation for when you change the name of your business and you have to officially register that. But yeah, so they plop him down and make him watch this video message. And this message is summoning Clooney to Solaris. And it's a guy named Jabarian that's summoning him. And specifically Clooney's character, because Jabarian can't trust anyone else with what's going on Solaris.
I don't know how to describe what we're experiencing up here. We can't even agree amongst ourselves what is happening.
This actor, Ulrich Tukur, not familiar to me before this movie, but I found him very captivating.
Yeah, he was good.
This is a German-born actor who's got a real face. Like he's got that specific serious scientist / astronaut face that just reads as credible immediately. And I think that's good casting, right? Because we don't really know this guy much at all outside of what we see in a couple of these video clips. And we have to trust him. Like, we have to get on his level in order for, I think, so much of this story to work.
Yeah, we have to trust him, and we have to believe that while he will not give any specifics about why Clooney is being summoned over the radio or whatever, he has good reasons for that are non-threatening. And like, interestingly, like, this guy has also played a ton of Nazis in movies. Like, he played like Rommel in a movie. So like,
this is why I found him so believable and trustworthy.
Well, no, I'm just saying, like, if that's a type that you can cast him as, like, it's interesting that he can also play like basically the opposite. Well,
you're saying he presents as an authority figure, and I think that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah.
His authority is evident in this movie.
Authority that is not like fucked up in some way.
Right.
So anyways, Clooney has a lot of questions. Like, it sounds like something bad is happening on Solaris. Why didn't you send security forces? And John Cho explains that they did, and that the security forces were never heard from again. And now the onboard AI is down on the station. So what they need him to do is go negotiate a safe return for some astronauts.
The company was hoping to solve this problem without involving a civilian, but obviously these are extreme circumstances.
That moment where you learn that security was sent and then never heard from again, I think a lesser movie would have movie score stung that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is the moment where I started to notice what this score was trying to do. This is Cliff Martinez with the score for this film, and it is so moody and atmospheric, and its breadth in tone never really veers toward jump scare. Like, the moment we learn that a security force was killed, you're expected to like feel a way about it, but it's almost like just a thing that happens on a space station.
Yeah, but it helps to underline how numb Clooney's character feels going through life. Like, it would be a jump scare for somebody who was living in the moment, and he's not. He's just like,
And how much does music do to help us understand a main character in that way?
Yeah.
This conversation ends with a very specific, like, last best hope kind of vibe, and you gotta come alone instruction.
Right.
That also veers the feeling toward a place that feels quite ominous. But we don't get a lot of time to kind of soak this up before we're like on the spacecraft that Clooney's on by himself as he approaches this space station.
Yeah, there's like the briefest description of what this journey is going to be like. The ship flies itself. You'll be asleep the whole time.
Just think of how many phone calls he had to make to reschedule all of his patients, given that he books 16 patients a day for an hour every day, and he does it for weeks and weeks at a time.
Oh, man.
Glad they skipped over that. This would have been as long as the first Solaris movie.
Whoa! Oh! Bah, 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 bah. You got Tarkovski'd. So, yeah, he's in his spacesuit. The shuttle that he's on transits in front of the camera, and reveals the space station that he's headed to. And the station is in orbit of a sun or a planet.
A purple.
Yeah, something purple. This is another moment that I thought it was very interesting that there was no music. Like, he is now on board the station looking around, and there's like little dried blood and broken stuff in a couple of places.
There's more blood than you'd expect on the floor in a science facility. Science facility and like spaceship often read as very clean and sterile.
Yeah.
This one's been kind of worked over.
And like nobody there to greet him. Like Jabarian not here to say like, hey, so glad you could make it. None of that is happening. And we are not getting the creepy haunted house score. We are getting nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like it's clear that he's getting more and more tense and more freaked out the more he sees, but the music is not trying to juice us in those respects.
It's not cheating. The mood of this thing rests solely on its two and maybe sometimes three primary actors.
Right.
I have 2 times available this week, 7 a.m. on Tuesday.
There is a meeting between Clooney's character and Jabarian, and that occurs in the morgue of the station. He unzips a body bag, and there's the dude from the original video. And there's another bag in there containing a person we don't know about.
Yeah.
Like, this person isn't identified. And finally, we find a survivor. Clooney hears some music echoing through the halls, and he finds a Jeremy Davies, which is a sort of person you don't want to meet first on an abandoned space station, I would say. A Jeremy Davies type. Probably not first on your list. Jeremy Davies, so great, but not who I would look forward to in a story like this.
Clooney lands back at Earth, and they're like, what? Like, Chris Kelvin, you're back. What's going on Solaris? And he grabs a gun and cocks it, and he's like, it was Jeremy Davies, and gets back on the shuttle and takes back off.
This Jeremy Davies performance is so great because I would say initially, and then maybe 80% of his dialogue starts with, yeah.
Yeah, like when you write a character like that, you know that you have to cast Jeremy Davies in the part.
But it's like the way he says that word is both suspicious and oblivious in a really weird combination.
Yes. Was that ICP that he was listening to?
Oh, I mean, based solely on the lyrics, sure, but I can't confirm that. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, I have confirmation that was a riddle box written by Mike E. Clark and Violent J.
Hell yeah.
Performed by Insane Clown Posse, courtesy of Jive Records.
I love that.
Yeah. We learned from Jeremy Davies that Jabarian was a suicide, that he took his own life, and that all of the blood that's smeared around there is from security forces shooting someone.
Yeah, blood. How about that?
We don't really find out whatever happened to them, or and I guess the other body in the morgue is the person that they shot, but security forces left and didn't come back and are unaccounted for. So
right.
Clooney's going to go meet Viola Davis, and he's like, you probably won't meet her.
That's because she's so paranoid. She only opens her door up a crack when Clooney's there, and she refers to something happening to the crew that hasn't started with him yet. This is what feels so ominous. It's like, oh, you're new? Just fucking wait until you start getting racked with what we're afflicted with. And until that begins for him, she doesn't really see a big point in talking to him. Like, the idea is that she could describe it, but the description would do it an injustice. Like, you just need to begin to experience what this is, because you're not going to really get on my level until you do.
There's something banging around back there during this conversation.
God, how much did you want to know what the banging was?
So bad.
Why don't we ever know?
It makes it scarier that we don't, right?
Yeah.
The fact that like part of why she's barricaded herself in her room is that she doesn't want whatever is banging around in there to affect the other people.
Yeah.
But she's on top of it.
Yeah.
It's fucking terrifying.
It really is.
Clooney sees a little boy running around and learns from Jeremy Davies that is Jabarian's son, Michael.
This is weird for a couple of reasons, right? Michael was not a part of the ship's complement at any point. Did not come with Clooney on the transport ship.
Yeah. So a little bit confusing. And so Clooney's like, I guess I should get to work and do like formal psychological evaluations of everybody. I guess I'll start with you, Jeremy Davies, for lack of a better person. So he does that. He interviews Viola Davis, who we learn has been there for quite a long time. She was working for NASA, and then DBA acquired the station from NASA, and so she became, I guess, an employee of DBA whenever that happened.
She provides as much context as we're ever going to get for this vessel and its mission and its crew.
Yeah.
And she also very early on starts to describe the laundry list of symptoms that she has felt along with the rest of the crew that make being an astronaut harder.
Yeah. I mean, not just symptoms, but like full diagnoses. Like she has self-diagnosed her psychological condition and also screened out like external factors that could be causing it. Like she has readings up the wazoo that say that this isn't like, there's not like psychotropic stuff in the air. Like we're not hallucinating this. We don't know what's happening.
There's something so great about, with the Viola Davis character especially, and much, much less so with the Jeremy Davies character, there's something a little bit horrifying about hearing her list of afflictions and also seeing her capable as a professional in articulating these things to someone who is there to try to help. You know, like that's an element of horror to me, is like someone who's just barely with it. This is like the horrible thing about like pre-Alzheimer's is like the cliff that you're on before you go over. And this version of Viola Davis is like on that cliff before she loses it completely, it feels like.
It also doesn't really feel like she needs a psychologist. Like nothing he can say to her can solve the problems that she's experiencing.
Yeah, yeah. Snow is open to the idea of going back to Earth, but can't quite articulate why Viola Davis's character would present an obstacle to that. They don't seem to be on the same page.
Yeah.
On that specific point.
So Clooney, I guess it's time to get some shut-eye for him. So he goes and watches some like personal logs of Jabarian and gets himself some shut-eye. And we get some sexy camera shots of the blue sun doing swirlies. And Clooney starts dreaming about Natasha McAlone.
One of the great late 90s, 2000s babes of a couple of decades. Yeah. Like, there was a time when she was really it. One of the greats.
She did a couple of seasons on that show Halo that was on Paramount Plus. I think that show got canceled, but I thought her character was really great. She's kind of a scientist for the good side, but has her own agenda character on that show and is a really fun villain.
I mean this as a compliment, and I hope it's taken as one. She kind of is Rene Russoing in a way that, like, when Rene Russo kind of stepped back from her career, it seemed like Natasha McAlone, how did you say her last name?
I don't know.
Ankylosaur.
Natasha McAlone, like, was able to step in and carry movies on her own in that same way.
For the purposes of this movie, I'm going to call her Natasha McAlone, which for reasons that if you haven't seen this movie will become clear as we go.
I like that. That's great. These dreams that Clooney has are fairly disconnected moments of her by herself, and then they grow into moments with the George Clooney character, and also involve real-life hangs with Dr. Gabarian.
Yeah.
They socialize together.
Yeah, and in like one of these social hangs, he talks about Solaris and the fact that it seems to know that it's being observed. And I really like this moment because they're like at a party talking about, they're like essentially making small talk about Jabarian's work when he's talking about Solaris knowing it's being observed. And meanwhile, Clooney is throwing bedroom eyes at Natasha McElwain across the room. And it seems like she knows she's being observed too.
As far as eyes movies go, you can't do better than Clooney and Natasha McElwain looking at each other at any point.
No.
Just one of the great reverse shot sequences you'll ever get are actors of this level of beauty looking at each other.
Her name is Rhea. She's a bit tricky, but I guess she's worthwhile.
This is kind of like an origin story of a great romance, and they have just absolutely electric levels of game when they start talking to each other.
Do you always resist your impulses?
Not always.
He wakes up and she is on the station with him, and he fucking shits himself. He's so scared.
Seems like a understandable reaction. No matter what you know or don't know about the Rhea character, it is shocking that she appears on the station with him. And he never stops being a scientist, which is such an interesting reaction to this. He asks her directly, "What are you doing here?"
What are you doing here?
How do you mean?
And if she can describe the apartment they shared together, and his questions are as much about making her believable to him as they are making her believable to her.
Totally.
Isn't that weird?
Like
they're working together to figure her out immediately.
This is not a movie that like plays toward comedy hardly ever. But one of the things that I love that George Clooney does, and he does this in a bunch of movies, is like when George Clooney can't believe what he's seeing is like such a fucking great moment in any movie that he's in, because he's like smacking himself in the face and like pinching himself and he's like, fuck, I am awake. God damn it. How do I square that with the fact that you're here? And then, like she can't describe places that she isn't in, it seems like.
It seems like a natural thing to want to go tell other people in the crew that there's a stranger that's appeared here. And her extreme reaction to the idea of being left alone is visceral. Like,
totally.
It's strong in a way that it feels over the top.
No! No! Don't leave me! Don't leave me!
Why? Why? Why?
I don't know.
We get some audio from her that we heard in voiceover right at the beginning when he was like waking up in his room in the rain. We heard audio of her asking if he loved her anymore. And that happens in this moment. And instead of letting her have a total meltdown panic attack, he, I guess, gives her a tour of the station. But this tour of the station is just a ruse to get her into an escape pod that he then triggers and fires her off into the cold darkness of space.
This moment really taught me a lot about George Clooney's character and how willing he was to stay on the scientific course. Yeah. Because this is like a lucid dream where he's like, I know this lady isn't real for sure. And if I'm dreaming or whatever, I'm blowing her out the airlock in the escape pod. Like, she's obviously not real.
Yeah.
And that choice was so illuminating to me.
And if she is real, that's worse. Like, get her out of here.
Yeah. If she is real, she's a monster.
Yeah.
So it's not a great date for them.
No.
I feel like toward the end.
I love the way Soderbergh covers this moment too, because it's just focused on Clooney. Like, the wall behind him is in soft focus. And so you can barely see the escape pod like pushing away from the station and her in the window like freaking out in soft focus. It is about how he feels about this, not about what she feels about it.
How much of Soderbergh's style is about the person doing the thing instead of the reaction to the thing? Like, constantly, this is one of his flourishes.
Jeremy Davies pays Clooney a visit, and this is maybe the first time that there's ever been like some true understanding between these two guys. Like, yeah, man, it's fucking heavy when you have to do that. kind of an energy.
I feel like if I were Clooney, I would count the escape pods at this point.
Yeah.
To see how often this had happened before and how often it is possible to happen.
You start to get the sense that like each person that goes to the station gets one person that appears to them. And in Jeremy Davies' case, it was his brother, but his brother stopped coming around and he doesn't know why. Clooney wants to know if Natasha McElwain will come back. And that's kind of a...
Snow's answer, though, is so curious. Like, do you want her to? Is both an answer and a non-answer there.
Right. Right.
And by the time you get to the end of this film, extremely telling.
Totally. Yeah.
Ben, do you sleep after blowing your lady friend out an airlock in an escape pod? This movie's version of science fiction will have you believe that George Clooney does try to get back to sleep after this.
And has very vivid dreams.
Yeah.
And it almost feels like he's kind of like willing her back into existence through this dream, because this one is a memory of like going to a cute little bookstore and him, you know, trying to like will her to agreeing to marry him.
Like, these are the moments over the course of a relationship that are more substantial than like birthdays and holidays, like the day-to-day stuff that makes being with someone special. Like, a lot of these vignettes are that.
Yeah. We learned that as a child, she had an imaginary friend that, and like, there's this weird story about how her mom was deeply mentally unwell and stopped talking to her, but then like through letters took on the identity of her imaginary friend. And so she only communicated with her mother as her imaginary friend via letters.
Yeah.
Which is wild shit.
That doesn't seem healthy.
There's a bit about how like she's in love with the right man in a George Clooney who is a trained psychologist.
We talked a little bit earlier about some of the Soderbergh-ness of composition, but there's another part that I wanted to discuss with you, which is like this graduated filter that gets used in so many of these shots, especially the shots towards George Clooney's past, where it feels like things feel squished and like heavy from the top of the frame with this shadowing going on here. And it kind of assists in our visual understanding of this being a dream logic or a dream world and something just being not quite clearly seen.
Yeah.
What'd you think of that?
I can't think of another movie that's used a grad filter to denote flashback or dream sequence.
Yeah.
Like this. And it's such an effective technique. Like, I feel like it's always ever black and white means the past, or you know, slow motion means the past, or wide ass lens means the past. But this was cool.
Yeah, I dug it.
So he wakes up and she's back. This is Natasha McElwain. And this one seems a little bit more self-aware about being something that isn't entirely real.
I don't actually remember anything. I only remember you.
This is the moment that introduces the idea that the horror just isn't felt by George Clooney. Like, it is also felt by her and the people like her.
Yeah.
That there's some sort of wall around their psychology or their memory or their ability to think that is felt. Like, it's recognized and it's horrifying for them.
Totally.
She knows that they were an item. She knows that they've been apart for a long time. And the feeling that she's, as much as he was in the beginning trying to mine her for information, she's trying to get information from him to try to like put herself together.
Yeah, so we get a lot of like backstory on their relationship. Like there's like a positive pregnancy test. There's not feeling the same about that situation among them, but we don't totally get the whole picture about what the fight was about the pregnancy test.
Did you see the cut scene, Ben, of the scene where he tells Natasha McElwain that, like, I didn't feel like I dumped into your Solaris. And then they both look to camera.
Yeah, yeah.
Tonally, that was all wrong for this moment.
I mean, they shot it just because, like, it's so good. Why not get it on film?
And Clooney's so much fun on set. Like, you hear this all the time about him.
Yeah.
Just a real wisecracker.
He was dumping in everybody's Solaris on set.
Sure was.
We got the scene of, like, a dinner party where it's him and her, and they're, like, debating about the existence of God, because that's what you do at a dinner party. She is a believer, and he is not. The audio drops out for a moment, and that's, like, it turns into this is an only eyes acting movie, because we can't even hear. We can just see how disappointed she is getting in him, and, like, how much she hates his, pompous asshole friends.
Yeah, how it feels without dialogue to feel ganged up on like that is really effective without dialogue.
Yeah.
Our existence is inevitable.
I mean, I do remember things, but I don't remember being there. I don't remember experiencing those things.
Back on the station, Natasha McElwain is really freaked out. She wants to understand, like, what's happening, and doesn't feel like she knows who she really is, despite the, like, primer that he's been trying to give her.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, oh yeah, but we'll just go back to Earth and, like, it'll all be okay.
There's, like, a tension between, like, we're seeing these memories, right? Are you clear on who is having these memories? It always seems like the film wants you to believe that it's all George Clooney memory all the time. But I think a case could be made for these moments being hers also.
I mean, she's coming out of him, right? Like, to hear her describe it later, like, everything is his memory. So maybe she, like, as he recounts it, she like absorbs it, but it's from his perspective, which is part of why it's so terrifying to her. Like,
absolutely. Like, the idea of only being able to think about something because someone else permits it is horrifying for sure. So this time when Clooney says he's got to leave, Rhea tells him that she'll be all right there alone. And Clooney talks to Snow. And Snow expresses some concerns that he has about him. And Clooney asks Snow to swear to secrecy about him blowing the first dead wife out of an airlock in an escape pod. Let's keep that to yourself, Snow. Because I kind of feel like I got a good thing cooking over here. And if she ever found out about Natasha McElwain, Natasha McElwain,
it's not gonna go great.
I mean, the way he puts it is that it would turn into a giant argument, and a giant argument is what we see in the next flashback. It's a real slobber knocker between him and Rhea about the pregnancy that was aborted, and they are not on the same page, family planning wise.
Yeah, I mean, he feels super betrayed. Like, she didn't think he wanted kids, and so just took it upon herself to get an abortion, and he is, like, profoundly hurt that she did that without discussing it with him. And it's one of those arguments that goes from bad to worse, because he's, like, storming around and storming out, and it's not like a physical fight, but it's not physical. Like, there's a lot of, like, holding onto clothes and shoving past that feels like very freighted and like it could go in a dangerous direction. And she is saying, like, I can't make it without you. And he seems mad enough to be fine with that and kind of storms out.
The way Snow describes the ongoing presence of Rhea and, like, the fact that she could play more of a role on the ship and, have interactions with Viola Davis's character. The way Snow articulates that reminded me of the conversation you and I had before hiring Wynde.
If we get women, together on the same team and all that shit, what happens? You know what happens. All kinds of shit you can't explain happens, but good shit, Mysterious, but good, usually very good. Things get solved,
Yeah. Davies wants McElwain to get together with Viola Davis, and We go to another memory where Clooney is reading this Dylan Thomas poem that comes up over and over again over the course. Like it was like a line that he used on her in their early courtship, and he's reading the actual poem while we get the like montage of suicide where she swallows a whole bunch of pills, and we learn that he found her body, presumably like stormed out after this argument, and when he came back later, she had taken her own life, which is a perfect time for this movie to break into a McLaughlin group.
Issue 1.
How badly do you wish there was a scene before this where George Clooney asks the crew if it's okay if his dead wife can join? The assumption that he makes that she's welcome there to participate in the station meeting, I think is hilarious to me.
Well, especially given what's being discussed. So we learned that they're calling these people visitors. Everybody gets a visitor that goes to Solaris, and she's his. And Viola Davis has determined that they may be made of subatomic particles, and they maybe therefore could be gotten rid of by using a negative Higgs field, like anti-Higgs bosons get talked about here, which is, as far as this movie goes in any direction of like having like a technology that is discussed and like how it might work.
How glad are you that this isn't a gun? Like, there was a choice made here about whether or not this is a thing you put in your hand and aim at a person and shoot, or if this is something that a person crawls into bed with, and then it is like an MRI machine or something. It's like shooting a beam at them. I love that you never see it, and I love that it's specifically not a hand carry item.
You see some machinery that's related to it, but you never see it work. You don't really know what we're talking about.
Great choice not to reveal that, I think.
Yeah, and it seems like pretty momentous that Viola Davis is out of her room for this meeting. She is the one that spills the tea about Natasha Mackle 1 to Natasha Mackle 2.
Oh, boy. You knew this was going to go bad.
Yeah, this reveal is not great. She runs off, and Viola Davis is like standing on business. She's like, she's not real. Like, she is upset, but that is a thing that is happening to manipulate your emotions, George Clooney.
It is a mistake to become emotionally engaged with one of them.
All tied up in this argument is also the idea of going back to Earth, because, I mean, that's part of why Clooney's there, is to assess what's going on the station, determine whether or not the crew has survived, and if coming back to Earth is possible. And Viola Davis is like, are you fucking kidding? Like, whatever we're afflicted with, we cannot risk bringing back home, because could you imagine an Earth suddenly filled with a bunch of these visitors and what it would do to that society? Like, it's over.
It's like the opposite of what happened when Thoron or whatever in Adventures in Games snapped his finger and half the people disappeared. It'd be double the number of people.
Yeah, too many people.
What is that guy's name? I feel like Thoron is wrong because there's a guy named Thor.
Thanos!
Anyways, yeah. Natasha Mackle too, very sad about this situation.
I love that she's allowed to leave the room and the remaining folks are there looking at each other like, well, that went terribly. Like, I love that we don't just leave with her. Like, we are left in the ashes of what a terrible moment that was. Good choice.
Yeah.
He wants to know who Viola Davis's visitor is, and she won't tell him.
No.
She only goes so far as to convince him that he's being manipulated by an alien ? Whose reasons they can't possibly understand right now. And this is the moment where I wondered who's in command of this mission and this station, because it seems, because you got a Viola Davis here, she has a certain authority as a person that you just feel.
Yeah.
Why don't you put her in charge?
You better just start dealing with it, Hudson.
But George Clooney is sent by this company to do company business. So it would seem as though the buck would stop with him.
It does feel like there should be some kind of rank system like that, but it is never discussed in this movie. I mean, Jabarian seems like he was the leader of it, right?
I think it's important to discuss just because of a moment like this where you come away from an argument without there being that natural, well, I've got rank and we're going with what my idea is. Like, we come away from it like without a resolution.
It's unnerving on a space station.
Yeah. So in George Clooney's quarters, Rhea has gone to bed upset, and maybe the worst part of a dead wife coming back to life is probably that, right? Like, God damn it.
Fuck!
Like, God, I miss her so bad, but now that I have her back, it's like, oh, God, this again?
All of her emotions, and it's my problem somehow.
Elsewhere, George Clooney has decided to sleep, and good for him, getting a little space.
Yeah.
He gets confronted by a Dr. Gabarian in the flesh, maybe? Shadowy, certainly. He seems to be in the room for real, and Dr. Jabarian seems to be having the sort of conversation that you have with a buddy in college after taking some really strong drugs, where you just talk about existence and consciousness and like what it all means. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But you're not scared of this doctor, are you? Like, I think that's an aspect to this. Like, this is a ghost or ghost adjacent person, a visitor. Why are we getting another visitor? I thought everyone only got one.
Is it another dream? Like,
I thought this guy was the end boss. Did you ever think that? Because he spoke with such authority, like he knew more than what he was saying, but kind of wanted George Clooney to figure it out for himself.
Instead, he's kind of urging Clooney to just get out of there. Like, you got to go home.
You'll die here.
Clooney gets up and like finds her on the floor and is horrified to discover that she's drunk like acid or something. They take her to the Solaris Station 6 bay, and she sort of undies before their very eyes. And Viola Davis's performance in this moment was very telling about like what the people that have been on this station for a long time are thinking about these kinds of things. She's just like rolling her eyes. She's like so tired of seeing people come back to life after being killed.
I wonder about the many ways she has seen this and the many attempts that have been made to kill these visitors. Like, the one that Natasha McElwain endures is gross and grotesque, but you can imagine it getting way, way worse than this.
Yeah.
She drinks liquid oxygen and then kind of shakes it off.
Yeah.
The way your father-in-law shakes off a shot of tequila. Like, smooth.
In your memory, you get to control everything.
Rhea seems upset to be there. It does not seem like her resurrection was by choice, which is an interesting note.
Yeah, and interesting in the context of the real Rhea's suicide and Clooney having found her. Then I feel like this is the moment that he kind of flips. He's now found her dead twice, and he sort of stops being open to the idea of the anti-Higgs boson ray taking her out. Because, like, there's a moment where, like, the lights flicker, and we're made to understand that Viola Davis has now sorted her visitor out. And we are not going to meet that person or know anything about what they were.
I like that choice. I like the mysteriousness of that.
Yeah. So now Natasha McElwain 3 is like, okay, well, it sounds like the Higgs field thing works. Like, let me go too. I'm not real.
She isn't convinced at this moment that she's even Rhea.
Yeah.
She's definitely sure that she doesn't have free will. And that makes her decision reasonable and correct in my mind.
Yeah.
This is the moment in time where you start to side with her instead of George Clooney.
Yeah, because he really, like, he gets somewhat monstrous. He's like,
yeah.
Like, this is my chance to undo my mistake, and you have to, like, do what you don't want to do so that I can feel the good feelings about you not being dead. And she's like, well, I'll just leave when you're asleep. And he's like, well, then I won't. And it sort of looks like he's gonna, like, imprison her, like, just sit against the door when they're in their apartment together.
I think a lot of effort is put toward making George Clooney's character seem empathetic, though, because the trauma he endured in finding her feels real and strong. And the case that he makes to her in this scene is like, I know this isn't perfect, but God, it's so much better than what we had before, which is nothing, and you being dead, right?
Yeah.
Well, sometimes that is better.
In a fucked up way, this seems related to the whole, like, do you keep a relative hooked up on life support as a vegetable, or do you let them go? Like,
right.
Do you exist in a world where that person is alive by any means, or do you turn the corner towards accepting their loss? This feels like that, because she's never going to be any more than what she is.
Right. So eventually he does get in bed and fall asleep, and there's like some really interesting coverage in this scene where there's like shot of Clooney sleeping and then this extremely long panning shot, and she's at the door to the room talking to somebody outside of it that we can't see. And then we get that same shot again, and this time it pans to the door. The door is all like torn up and rusted, and like a monster has attacked it. And then like there's like multiples of her in the room, and one of them is talking to the little kid that's Dr. Jabarian's visitor.
Yeah.
And then he has the dream of finding her body like back in the past when Natasha Mackle 1 committed suicide.
Clooney is quick to accuse Viola Davis's character of murder. But her defense is that it's not murder, and before it wasn't a suicide on the station either. And that's because these things aren't human. This is the level you need to get on, George Clooney. Like, this is not your wife. This is coming out of that purple gas. And now that this is done, finally, I'm ready to go home.
Yeah. I mean, she thinks of it in terms of a war. And she's like, we're putting everything back right. She's like going to try and turn the AI of the station back on, which is like very vague to me, like what that represents, but it seems like a big step in like normalizing the situation. And she is in the room that the morgue is in and has locked the door behind her. And Clooney gets her attention and points at a bloody patch on the ceiling. And what they find in there is the Jeremy Davies actual. It's like I guess he never said the word twin, but identical twin brother is what he meant by brother. And the visitor killed the real one and stuffed him up in a ceiling panel.
What a story he tells when you hear about this. Like, the double is awake and online, let's say, for like 30 seconds. And the first half a minute of his life is killing his actual.
Yeah.
Incredible.
He also reveals that they are being sucked into Solaris, that the mass of the planet has been increasing, and there's not really anything they can do about it because the Higgs device has burned out the fuel for the reactors on the station. So much like the apparition of Jabarian before, he's like, you guys should go. You should get out of here.
Yeah.
Should be a good time to go. And so they get all suited and booted, and they head to the shuttle, just Viola Davis and George Clooney, and she gets on board and starts going through pre-flight checklist stuff, and Clooney hesitates at the threshold.
We cut back to Earth during this hesitation, and Clooney appears to have made it.
Yeah.
But he's just kind of a shell of his former self. Hard to know how far he's fallen from the beginning of this movie, given that he wasn't really with his own life to begin with. Up top, he's just kind of going through the motions of a life.
Is it possible to be a shell of a shell?
Yeah. Yeah. He describes his life as a series of a million little gestures, like little performances he has to do. And one of these is cooking a meal. And we see a scene that is a lot like the scene from earlier in the film where he cuts his finger, except when he puts his finger under the faucet, that wound heals itself. What does it mean?
Does he have Wolverine-style healing powers?
It means he never left Solaris.
Yeah, and the The piece of the VO that really stuck with me was being haunted by the idea that he didn't remember her right. Because she makes the case, like when she's arguing for getting to go into the anti-Higgs device, that like Natasha McElthry is suicidal because he is remembering the suicidal version of her. And so anything about her in any way is filtered through his memory, which is imperfect. And the idea that he would then like go back to Earth and remember an imperfect version of his wife as like the most recent version of the memory seems kind of intolerable to him. So we cut back to the station and he's still standing at the airlock to the pod, and he like shuts the door and stays behind. And I love how Viola Davis like does not spare him a thought. Like she is out of there. Like if you're not coming, that is fine by her.
In any other film, you'd get the "What are you doing, George Clooney? You gotta come with me." But you're right. That's absent here completely. What do you think of the expression on Snow's face when things are coming to a head? He's been left alone in his chamber.
Yeah.
When he kind of looks up toward the ceiling, I wondered about this expression and how you interpreted it. Is he in pain? Is he happy that this thing is coming to a close?
I mean, the visitors don't seem to have any like special knowledge of what's going on, or if they do, they would never admit it. So it's hard to know. I mean, that look up sort of feels like an appeal to the Almighty.
It comes on the heels of Clooney like staggering through the station looking for Rhea, and then like the sound taking him down to his knees. This is a sound that it seems like Snow either doesn't hear or doesn't hear the same way.
Yeah. I don't have like a cogent interpretation of it, but after the sound abates, Clooney wakes up and takes the hand of the little boy, and then we're like back in his kitchen, and Natasha McElhone is there. Natasha McElhone? Anyways, it sort of seems like they're in Solaris now. Like they like have merged with the infinite. It's sort of the Nexus from Star Trek Generations, basically.
It was like being inside Joy.
Yeah.
Except for there aren't any like horrific little Victorian children there celebrating Father Christmas coming.
She says life and death and the things they've done don't really matter in this place where they're at. And that's how the film ends. Ben, did you like this movie?
This is my chance to undo that mistake.
Well, it was a laugh riot, Adam. And no, I like this movie a lot. I am glad we rewatched it because I don't think I have seen it since I saw it in theaters. And yeah, I love Soderbergh's style as a filmmaker. And this was a really superlative cast doing a great job with a very weird script. It makes me want to watch the original as well because like that movie long as hell, but it's supposed to be absolutely phenomenal. And Tarkovsky is like such a legend. I've been remiss in not consuming more of his work.
Yeah, same. I like this kind of science fiction a lot. The whole Star Trek Generations ribbon was such an interesting idea. Like that film spent a lot of time on and about the ribbon, but without any sort of depth.
Yeah.
In a way that I really was hungry for. I wasn't exactly sure, and I'm not sure if anyone is really clear on what the rules for that are and what exactly you're capable of and how specifically you know when you're out of it.
Right.
Like, the dark ending to Star Trek Generations is Picard wondering if he's going to be in the Nexus forever and how he can never understand if he's ever gotten out of it.
Totally.
And this film ends in a way I kind of wish Star Trek Generations did, in a weird way. I can get with grief. It's a powerful emotion, and the idea of avoiding it is tantalizing with the way that George Clooney makes decisions here. Like the idea that an imperfect, like he rubber dolls his wife here. He basically, like, he has a fake version of his dead wife that is compromised, but is good enough given the depth of his grief. And you can kind of understand, even though it's so fucked up, that like why a person would make a decision like that.
Yeah.
In order to either overcome or avoid the grief that he's felt about his situation. And I like being confronted with those ideas, and in a science fiction context especially. Like, if this was a contemporary film about a dead wife and grief and stuff, that's a difficult slog in a lot of ways. But somehow setting this into a science fiction future makes those feelings more palatable in a more experimental kind of way, which I think allows a viewer to like get closer to it in a way that doesn't hurt them. At least that was my experience, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's not very often that a movie like tackles topics that are as heavy as this in a way that feels like accessible, and like I wouldn't mind like going out to this movie with my family, you know, like
safe is a weird word, but like the science fictionification of it kind of makes it a safer subject.
Yeah, like I don't know anything about this like It Ends With Us movie, but I saw like some advertisements for it and I was like, fuck that. Like it just seems too heavy and it doesn't sound like a movie that I want to go see just for the heaviness of it. Like I think like just based on the trailer, I don't know if that's like an accurate trailer or not, but like it seemed like the subject matter and themes of it were just a drag, and maybe not super different in terms of the subject matter and themes from this movie, but this movie is not a drag.
Yeah.
In that way. So that's an interesting magic trick, and one of the things I think sci-fi is particularly good at.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I'm glad we watched this one. This was good.
Yeah. You want to see if there's anything good in the P1 inbox?
Oh, yeah, I'm going to head that way, Ben.
Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
Adam, we got a promotional P1 here, and it goes like this. I have an urgent book recommendation. She Comes First by Ian Kerner, PhD. Oral sex for women can be stress-inducing. Jokes about smell/taste, shame over body size, guilt for taking too long. This book teaches you how to center cunnilingus as core play instead of an awkward lick before rushing into P&V. Learn to love giving incredible cunnilingus and mind-blowing orgasms with this book. It changed our lives. We haven't touched my vibrator in weeks. Wishing great sex to all FODs. This is a message from Tasha D. So get this book ASAP. She Comes First by Ian Kerner. Kerner.
Great book. One of my favorite books. I read it every summer.
Yeah. Strongest possible recommendation for going downtown and doing a good job while you're down there.
Yeah. It's fun.
Thanks for the rec, Tasha D.
Get in there.
Yeah.
And get a great book about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I would say leave it on the coffee table for when you have guests over, you know?
Loan it to a friend who you think could use it. Why are so many people sending me this book? I've got like 12 of these books.
Yeah, you guys think we don't know about this book, but just ask Rob Adler how many times he's edited one out of a Code 47. Like,
I know, yeah.
We typically try to start a Code 47 with 10 or 15 packages just so that we can get like 4 or 5 things that are Star Trek stuff and not all books about eating pussy.
Right. Inescapable. That's what this book has become. All right already! But seriously, put some fucking effort into satisfying your partner. It's worth it.
She Comes First.
Ben, our second priority 1 message is of a personal nature. Weird to say that, given the promotional message was also personal. This message is from Robbie. It is to Ben and Adam and Wynde, and I really hope it has nothing to do with oral sex.
Okay.
Message goes like this. I like your shows and can't believe the old Jumbotron was available. Please encourage Wynde to be on mic more. She has the perfect voice for it. Very cool NPR style. Levels out you guys more drive time radio excitement voices, which I also love. Is that 350 characters? Why don't you go ahead and put a random drop in here?
Wow.
Goes by the name of Fred.
Fred.
Just Fred.
Fred. I am Fred.
It's a surprisingly old model.
Interesting. Spicy.
All right, Fred. What can you tell us about yourself?
I'm too sexy for my shit.
shut.
Yeah, I mean, Robbie hits on something that we've known for a long time. Wynde's got a great voice. Wynde is a radio professional. It's one of the Miriam reasons we hired her.
That's true. Yeah, the first time she read the credits out on one of our shows, I think Adam and I were both like, oh, fuck. Like, she does have a real radio voice in a way that neither of us do, and we were a little self-conscious about it, but I think we've leaned into it and embraced the fact that we hired somebody that is just an all-around stone-cold pro and funnier than us also.
I don't think she's funnier than me, but I do think she is a stone cold pro, and she makes me want to be more pro in all the ways that matter in doing the things that we do. She's great.
She's great, and she's funnier than you. All right, if you'd like to leave a P1 on the show,
absolutely brutal.
MaximumFun.org/Jumbotron, and like Robbie on the Cape for the winter discovered, you can get one with a pretty fast turnaround on Greatest Trek right now. And hey, we've got season 5 of Lower Decks coming up.
Yeah, it's coming.
So if you want to target one to a specific Lower Decks episode or a specific date in like November or December, this is your opportunity. Opportunity is knocking. Can you hear it?
Yeah, coming right up. Hey, Ben.
What is that, Adam?
Did you find yourself an Edward Larkin of this movie?
I mean, I don't feel like I have much choice but to give it to Jeremy Davies. He's such a fun that guy actor, and
yeah.
I mean, I believe that Edward Larkin would be an ICP fan. I believe he would be an insane clown dude.
You imagine he'd be down with the clown in the parlance?
Yeah, I think does Edward Larkin not have Juggalo-like vibes?
I think so. I think you're onto something there.
Can you imagine like living that far into the future and hanging on to the Juggalo lifestyle?
Can't imagine it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful vision of the future. How about yourself?
I was inclined to say it's George Clooney's character, just because he seems so detached from both his own life and the mission that he's on, and the things that he's confronted with. It's almost as if, like, as soon as he sees his wife again, all other matters go away and it's just about being with her.
Yeah.
And I think when you cease to be a professional and start making your decisions for other reasons, that's an Edward Larkin experience right there. So I think that's my supporting case for that choice.
Okay. Wow. Well, Adam, why don't you head to our company Slack and read the people a warning bois. Of course, this is the segment where we express our appreciation for folks who put the word out about our show by posting online or leaving a nice review on Apple Podcasts or whatever podcast app you like.
Prepare a buoy and launch it when ready.
Warning buoys.
An emergency buoy. A warning buoy.
How about this for a warning bois, Ben? We had an FOD go to Dragon Con.
Okay.
And this person met up with Tawny Newsome, and Tawny mentioned that she actively uses Greatest Trek as a reference for bits for old Trek. And I thought that was a delight to hear. Like, Tawny's been an FOD, a real FOD, for a long time. And it's a delight to hear that anyone likes our show anywhere, but especially gratifying to know that like the people who make the Star Trek we love also enjoy the show that we make. So that was really cool. Vernacular Shift went to Dragon Con and sent that in via X, and that's kind of an in-person warning bois right there if I've ever read one.
Man, Tawny Newsome is the coolest. Feel like she's just in a coolness class totally outside of ours. It's so flattering every time she's nice to us. If folks out there haven't listened to her podcast, Yo, Is This Racist? I recommend. Give it a try.
Yeah, she's great.
All right. Well, that just about does it for us today. Really appreciate everyone who listens. You're going to learn about the next movie on the Greatest Trek Film Fest in the credits that Wynde is about to read right now.
Greatest Trek is an Uxbridge Shimoda podcast on the Maximum Fun Network. It's hosted by Ben Harrison and Adam Pranica, and it's produced and edited by Wynde Priddy. Next week on Greatest Trek Film Fest, we're going back to the 80s to watch a sequel with an all-star cast. The movie is 2010, the year we made contact. As always, we want to thank the Max Fund members who support this show financially. Members get access to all of the network's bonus content, plus the new bonus episodes Ben and Adam put out every single month. You can set up your membership in just a few minutes at MaximumFund.org/join, and we really appreciate it. Thank you to Nick Dittmore, who created the show art, and Adam Ragusia, who composed the theme music. There's a lot for you to see at the Greatest Trek YouTube channel, so make sure you're subscribed over there. And there's also the Greatest newsletter that comes out monthly. You can sign up for that at podshop.biz. Thanks to Rob Adler and Bill Tilley for their work on the @GreatestTrek social media pages. Follow those accounts and use the hashtag #GreatestTrek when you post about the show online. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next week for Greatest Trek Film Fest.
Maximum Fun,
a worker-owned network
of artist-owned shows
supported directly
by you.